the festivities have begun. We are into the festive period, which of course means huge amounts of eating for most of us. We eat more than we will normally eat at Christmas. It's a time of year to test to see just how much we can eat. On Christmas Day, I eat until the announcement. I eat until I lean back and go, well, that's it. I can eat no more. I'm completely and utterly stuffed. I can't eat another thing. I will never, ever eat again. And I mean it. Half an hour later, I'm going to have a sandwich out of all the leftovers that was left from Christmas. I can't believe I'm still eating. I genuinely believed I would never eat again half an hour ago. I have an amazing capacity for food. I think it's a Christian thing. Christians love to eat to excess on their holidays. Other religions starve themselves on holidays. Jewish people have a holiday, they starve themselves. Muslims have a holiday, they starve themselves. It's almost like Christians have had somebody look through the Bible for opportunities to eat to excess. What have you got for me? Well, it says here that Jesus had a very big meal, then he starved himself for 40 days and 40 nights. Whoa, 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 go back. What was the first part? It says he had a very big meal, Jesus. Okay, let's focus on that day. I say we eat pancakes all day. We will celebrate the day with pancakes. We will eat pancakes till we're sick. What else have you got? Well, it says here that Jesus died on the cross. Tricky. All right, let's take the symbol of a cross and put it on a hot bun. We'll eat hot cross buns until we're sick. How about that? And the house will smell amazing. They smell divine. And then apparently he was resurrected on the Sunday. You know what? I don't even want to hear the story. We've already made our decision. We're going to hide chocolate in the garden and eat till we're sick. And of course, all the traditions now, all the traditions of Christmas, which we love. I mean, without the traditions of Christmas would not be what it is. But the point is, we don't really like all of them, but we pretend to because it's Christmassy. Mulled wine, hot wine. We don't like hot wine. We spend the whole year avoiding hot wine. You know, tea, coffee, hot wine. Why offer me hot wine? But at Christmas, oh, I love this hot, spiced, boiled wine, sickly sweet wine. It smells nice. After one sip, it's quite nice. And then it starts to cool, and you abandon it. No one's ever finished a mulled wine. I don't think I really fancy that. Brussels sprouts? Why do we put ourselves through this annual Bush Tucker trial? We don't like them. Who decided we should be eating these squashed-up vegetable fart balls every year? We don't even like turkey. We don't eat turkey all year. There's no Kentucky Fried Turkey. We don't like turkey. It's quite a dry, flavourless meat. You only have a look at what we do to it to tolerate it, okay? We cover it in cranberry sauce and gravy. We stuff it with meat we'd rather be eating. Bread sauce? Since when was bread a sauce? Want some bread sauce? Yes, pour that bread all over my turkey. More fart balls? Don't mind if I do. Tell me more about the hot sickly wine. And crackers. Who looked at Christmas lunch and said, I know what this needs, a paper hat, a bad joke, and some toenail clippers. That would really wrap off this meal. The fact is, we wouldn't choose, okay? We wouldn't choose any of these things if we had the choice. At no time during the year would we go to a restaurant, the waiter comes over, can I get you the wine list? Have you got any hot wine? Hot, sickly, boiled, fruity wine. Maybe they don't like after one sip. You got any of that? Like any bread for the table? Liquid bread. Have you got liquid bread? Like someone's chewed up a loaf and put it into a jug? I'm going to pour that over my main meal tonight. Chef special is the chicken. Have you got a drier, less flavoursome meat like a turkey? Any side orders? Have you got any fart grenades from Belgium? Is there anything else I can get you? I think a mini sewing kit would round this off quite nicely. Oh, and actually, waiter, half an hour after I've finished, I want everything again in a sandwich. Thank you.
If you believe in socialism, I would recommend to you to look at the facts. In the last century, socialism has been tried in more than 40 countries. Everywhere it has failed, and everywhere it has led to persecution, mass murder, and starvation. Those are the facts. Don't get caught in a dream. Look at the human toll on those 40 countries. Socialism is predicated on destroying free markets, on destroying representative democracy and republicanism, and it's predicated on destroying the heritage of Judeo-Christian civilization. The fact is, this isn't about representing your views, it's about a utopian image of the future, an image that, let's remember, cost the lives of more than 100 million human souls in the last century. So when the Victims of Communism Foundation does a poll and finds out that 42% of millennials wish to live in a socialist or communist America, we have a problem, friends, because that is not what we fought World War II or the Cold War about. After the midterms, who knows? We have the lunatics taking over the asylum, when you've got people like Ocasio-Cortez coming in, when you've got people who literally don't know how many chambers there are in the legislative body of the United States coming in as representatives, as congresswomen. I don't see the pragmatists, but maybe Chuck Schumer, for his own personal survival, will get control of the lunatics.
Listen, I think it's important. I mean, Democrats really, and I say this over and over and over again, they have lost their way. And, you know, growing up, I've told the viewers, I came from a big Irish Catholic family. My father came from a big Irish Catholic family. We were a smaller Irish Catholic family, just two of us, my sister and myself. But he came from a family of 8. And, you know, to him growing up, you were a Democrat like you were Irish, like you were Catholic. It just went with the territory. And if you could manage to be a member of the union, you know, hats off to you. So that party, that seems to be gone. That is missing. This is why Hillary Clinton left. And you have only to look at what happened in places like Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump brought so many, you know, blue-collar Democrats into the sphere, into the circle. And I think that as they increasingly are saying, look, we're going to stand up for the rights of these people who aren't American citizens over the actual American citizens, it's just plain bad politics.
Trish, it's very simple. The Democrat Party of yesteryear, your father's Democrat Party, was one of compassion, was one that focused on the working class, but it was a party of patriots. These are people who loved America. JFK was a Democrat. Could you imagine a more hardcore anti-communist, strong on national security than John F. Kennedy?
No, he also cut taxes, by the way.
And John F. Kennedy would not be allowed in today's DNC. This is a party that, remember, Hillary Clinton said, I want to have a borderless hemisphere. I want no borders from Canada down to South America. What happens to the American working class when we have illegal migration unfettered as we have in Europe? I think you're absolutely right. The Democrat Party has left the real Democrats, and they have become fundamentally un-American.
Dr. Gorka, always good to have your perspective. Thank you, sir, as always. I want to point out you can check out Sebastian's new book, Why We Fight. It's out right now. Check it out. Coming up, everyone, total chaos and destruction in France as the country's rocked by another weekend of...
Have you heard? Certain politicians don't believe in science.
The Republicans are showing themselves to be anti-science.
Once again, the Republican Party looks like it's the anti-science party.
The media say there's a conservative war on science. But is that true?
The real war on science is the one from the left.
For 25 years, John Tierney's written about science for the New York Times. He often questions conventional wisdom, as in this story, which revealed the pointlessness of much recycling.
It set a record for hate mail at the New York Times Magazine.
Now Tierney writes for the Manhattan Institute's City Journal, where he recently argued that the real war on science comes from the left. That seems odd, since surveys show people on the right are more likely to believe in creationism.
Right, but creationism doesn't affect science. It doesn't affect the way science is done.
But wait, what about President Bush's opposition to stem cell research?
Destroying human life in the hopes of saving human life is not ethical.
He didn't stop stem cell research.
It was just the government wouldn't fund it.
The government wouldn't fund it.
Pay for it.
And it turned out that it really didn't matter much. People talk about this Republican war on science, but if you look around, my question is, where are the casualties? You know, what scientists lost their jobs? I can't find examples where the right wing stopped the progress of science. Whereas you can look on the left and you see so many areas that are taboo to research.
Hell no, GMO.
Some research on genetically modified foods became taboo because of protests from the left. Tierney says that stifled research into what could have been a second green revolution to feed Africa. Also, Rachel Carson's silent spring and her baseless claim that DDT caused cancer in humans is still taught in high schools today. But there's no mention of the millions killed by malaria because countries needlessly ban DDT. And scientists can't even talk about whether genes affect intelligence.
The federal government stopped funding IQ research decades ago.
Researchers who looked at it anyway, like Charles Murray, are screamed at on college campuses.
People who studied IQ needed bodyguards for their lectures. It's something that can't be discussed.
Likewise, researching gender differences has become taboo.
You can't talk about sexual differences between men and women. I mean, it's okay if they favor women. I mean, you can say that men are more likely to commit crimes, but you can't suggest anything that there might be some kind of sexual difference that might predispose men to be more interested in a topic.
Google fired engineer James Damore merely because he wrote a memo suggesting that sex differences might explain why more men work in tech.
Damore just pointed out very basic scientific research about differences between the sexes. And the people who, and the experts in this, as soon as he published that memo, said, yes, he basically got the science right.
But that didn't matter.
To even mention that there are these differences in the sexes was just taboo. You can't say that there are more men interested in sitting all day doing computer coding than women are.
It's not that women aren't doing well in life, says Tierney. Women get most college degrees and graduate degrees.
Women dominate virtually every extracurricular activity. But all the focus has been, why aren't there more women physicists and mathematicians, and of course in the sports area too. And so there's this idea that they're being discriminated against there, when in fact the evidence really shows the reverse. There have been just enormous studies of who gets grants, who gets tenure, who gets interviews for jobs, and women get preference, if anything.
The women would say, you men run most of society. You head the corporations, you make more money. It must be discrimination.
I mean, men are more aggressive, they're more risk-taking, the status matters more to them, making money matters more to them. Women aren't as interested in that. There's this enormous evidence.
You can't say that.
Well, I guess I won't be president of Harvard.
He says today's universities are dominated by leftists.
In the social sciences, Democrats outnumber Republicans by at least 8-1. In some fields like sociology, it's 44-1. Students are more likely to be taught in sociology by a Marxist than by a Republican. It's gotten worse and worse. Once an academic department gets a majority of people who are on the left, they start hiring people like themselves, and pretty soon the whole department is that way. And they start to think that their opinions and that their interests are not only the norm, but the truth.
So they publish articles like this one saying conservatives have lower IQ and are more likely to be prejudiced. Science shows conservatives are more close-minded.
The problem with this is it's been done by all these liberal social scientists. They would ask people about left-wing groups like communists, and conservatives were more prejudiced. Finally, someone went out and he started asking different kinds of questions. And when he asked liberals about things that mattered to them, like environmentalism or like Barack Obama, it turned out they were just as irrational and dogmatic as conservatives were.
One survey question asked, do you believe in the long run hard work usually brings a better life?
I mean, that seems obvious to anyone, right? But that was classified as a rationalization of inequality.
Another study asked if you agree that the Earth has plenty of natural resources if we just learn how to develop them.
That is conventional wisdom among people who study economics. But that was classified in that study as a denial of environmental realities.
So think about that next time you hear about that conservative war on science.
When it comes to science, I mean, if anything, conservatives are more scientifically literate than liberals are.
I'm a proud Latina, I'm a proud family, come from a proud family of immigrants, and I'm an even prouder Democrat. And my question here today is based off a comment that you said earlier. You said that the merits of the Three-Fifths Compromise is up for debate. So who are you, or who is anyone, to debate the merit of one's humanity? How can you deny the legacy the Three-Fifths Compromise has had and that slavery has had on the extent of racism in the United States?
Look, right here in the first row, I think she got up. There's my wife, Debbie. She's from Venezuela. Her mom is Mexican-American. I'm married to a Latina. She's a first-generation immigrant. I'm a first-generation immigrant. So we're all coming to America and trying to make sense of all this. Now, quite honestly, I think you would have to admit that I have done nothing in this talk today to either minimize or downplay. Far from downplaying racism, I've stressed it. I'm simply pointing the finger of blame where it belongs, and you're trying to hide it. See, the difference is, because you are a Democrat, you are willing to overlook the crimes of the Democratic Party. But let me tell you this, the Democratic Party is in fact, the party of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan and lynching and all the horrors of American history, including complicity with fascism, the internment of the Japanese Americans in World War II, the reigniting of the Klan in the late teens and 20s. All of this was done by Democrats, and they were opposed all along the way by Republicans. So the problem is that today, if you're a Democrat, you're a committed Democrat, you like the welfare state, you like Obamacare, or you're a progressive historian, you are in the awkward position of having to confess to a whole series of crimes that your team did. Crimes, by the way, that the Democratic Party has never admitted, never apologized for, never paid 1 penny of restitution for. So this is a very ugly position to be in. And the only way to do it is to lie through your teeth. Hide the actions of the Democratic Party, blame everybody else. America did it, the white man did it, the Southerners did it, everybody except the guys who actually did it.
Lincoln was elected to unite a country and stop slavery. Democrats smeared him, went to war against him, assassinated him. Now their target is Trump. They say he's a racist, a fascist. But who are the real racists and fascists? A nation dies, but its people are not free. It's now up to us to save America a second time.
This is Andrew Klavan on The Culture. With everyone debating the public funding of Planned Parenthood, it's time to have a serious discussion about abortion. Since this is a divisive, even incendiary issue, let me say at the outset that we here at Klavan on The Culture fully support a woman's right to kill her children at any time and without warning. Children are noisy and messy. They crap all over everything and hog the PlayStation. They also make mommy too tired to get you a beer when you want one, and give her an excuse not to saddle up for a ride to the Boom Boom Corral with the old Ranger. That's why the Supreme Court, in its famous 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, declared that the right to have an abortion is in the Constitution. Though the print is so small, it's hard to see it. You have to hold the page in just the right light while keeping your eyes sort of half closed. And even then, it only appears on magic days. In exchange for this delightful new right to really get on your kids' nerves by sucking them out of the womb and tossing their corpses into the trash, people did have to give up another right. The right to debate the issue freely among themselves and then elect representatives to make laws according to the moral understanding of their communities. With no democratic way to reconcile their positions, citizens have become sharply divided. Anti-abortion advocates maintain that a fetus is, at the very least, the unique and irreplaceable blueprint for an individual human being, and thus endowed with the right to life. Those favoring abortion argue that they really meant to use protection, but were stoned out of their gourds at the time. They call abortion a woman's right to choose, because while a person is inside a woman's body, he has no rights of his own, as I can personally attest. But whether you oppose or defend abortion, this much is inarguable. Since around 1970, the number of abortions and the number of illegitimate births have both skyrocketed, especially among minorities. Abortion defenders say this is simply because minorities don't have easy access to contraception, since minorities live on the planet Gununu 12, where condoms melt in the heat of the triple sun. But what seems far more likely is that abortion is part of a complex of sex-related behaviors, practices, and attitudes that over the last 40 years has led to a drastic increase in the number of single-parent children. These children are at enormous risk of ending up on welfare or in prison, which means that the individual freedom from sexual consequence that abortion seems to offer may in fact be a gateway to societal dependence on, and thus control by, an ever more powerful state. Still, the killing your kids part is a definite plus. This is Andrew Klavan on The Culture. This is Andrew Klavan on The Culture. As the new year begins, I hear you asking, what do we mean by our culture? Maybe that was just me. In any case, Western culture began with the democracy in ancient Athens. There, since Christianity hadn't started yet, everyone was gay. As a result, theater thrived, including the groundbreaking production of Sophocles' Antigone, which dramatized an extraordinary question. Does an individual have a natural right to defy the power of the state in order to obey the gods? Unfortunately, there were very few Jews in Athens at the time, so no one actually went to the theater, and Antigone folded out of town. There were Jews, however, in Jerusalem. One of them, Jesus of Nazareth, seemed to many to personify the presence of their one God, lending to individual man an authority and worth that superseded the prerogatives of both church and state. Church and state celebrated the joyous revelation with their traditional banquet, followed by a crucifixion, a clever plan to make sure Jesus' philosophy would never spread. Now, within the crucible of the Roman Empire, Jesus-inspired Christianity united the visions of Athens and Jerusalem, giving Western man the raw materials he needed to understand the imperative of individual liberty. He also had the raw materials he needed to invent the light bulb, but he didn't do that either. Instead, Rome was overrun by savage tribes who spent the next 1,500 years slaughtering one another while working out the ramifications of Christian loving-kindness. This blood-soaked melee was known as Europe, and despite all its wars and persecutions and French people, it managed to create the single greatest culture the globe has ever known. Bach and Mozart, Shakespeare and Dante, Leonardo and Michelangelo, Descartes and Newton, a culture whose spirit informed the astounding moment in 1776 when the most brilliant group of political thinkers ever born gathered in Philadelphia to declare, individual man has a God-given authority and worth that supersedes the prerogatives of both church and state. Why didn't we think of that before? Thus began the United States of America, which led the Western world to its freest and most prosperous era yet, and whose story continues to this day. I think. Actually, I'll have to get back to you on that. So stay tuned to PJTV for this year's Klavan on The Culture.
So one of our producers, George, he's in the Greek islands right now, specifically Lesbos, infiltrating NGOs who work with the migrants to try and bring them into Europe. And we're expecting a call from him any minute now to give us an update on the situation. So keep you posted. What this organization are doing, they're not just teaching refugees how to make it through the system. While I'm sure there are genuine refugees that are trying to get to Europe and go through these requests with the government, this group, Advocates Abroad, they're looking for a 100% success rate. They are trying to get every single migrant that comes across those borders, illegally or legally, criminal or not, they are trying to get them through to Europe under refugee status. There is a process in place to determine who is and who is not a genuine refugee. And the government, they have made checks and balances for that. They have made sure they can determine who that is. And This group, they are trying to skirt that process. They are trying to make a mockery of Europe's borders and get every single person through. One of the craziest things in that recording is the fact that they are teaching people who could very well be, many who are likely Muslim, who are perfectly safe in many Middle Eastern countries, how to pretend to be Christian, how to pray, how to say that Christmas is their favorite holiday. I mean, that is insane. There are Christians who are being beheaded, that are facing jail, that are facing just complete and utter persecution, that are now being put at the back of a line for support in Europe because advocates abroad are teaching people perjury, how to lie to the government and pretend to be Christian so they can get through. It is making an absolute mockery of Europe's borders. It is making a mockery of the proper system put in place to help genuine refugees. And it is hurting both genuine migrants and the European people who now have to deal with a mass influx of people that are entirely unvetted. We spoke to the migrants on the camps in the Greek islands, and they were telling us one of the biggest things they fear are ISIS in their camps and criminals in their camps that have just gotten through and come to Europe. And there is a very good chance that advocates abroad are coaching those people as well, are coaching criminals, are coaching ISIS how to skirt the system, how to get by and lie to the government and get into Europe. Of course there are people who need legal help. Of course there are genuine refugees out there. But what they need is non-partisan, real legal help, not like actual activists that are trying to do illegal behavior, not advocates abroad. So that was just a very small snippet of some of the amazing content we have with our project Borderless. There is still so much we have yet to expose and so much more we want to expose that the government and the media are trying to cover up. Unfortunately, so far we have come to the end of our budget for the Borderless film, but we're looking to you to help us continue this project as there is so much more we want to investigate and bring forward. If you want to help, please check out the links below or go to borderless.movie to do that. And a huge thanks to everyone who has already supported making this possible. We'll see you guys in the next expose.
Simon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, honourable members, invited guests and others. This is truly a blessed opportunity, and Suidlanders organisation is, let the record reflect, grateful for it. The thanks of Suidlanders also goes to our hosts, the European Conservatives and Reformists Group, for their faithfulness and courage in going against the spirit of this age and in standing for the immutable foundational European values, in being willing to deal with this most sensitive of subjects in the New World Order, namely the new South African Rainbow Nation, as it is known. The biggest challenge of this speech lies in getting you to believe anything at all that I have to say, because almost everything that I have to say to you today is the diametric opposite of what our government, the globalist media, the South African public, the liberal elite, and academia will tell you. Indeed, our new President Cyril Ramaphosa has recently said that Suidlanders is spreading lies, that we are motivated by racism, and that, for example, he stated this explicitly in New York to Bloomberg Media, there are no attacks on white farmers. In fact, he said it twice. A subject with which you are no doubt familiar, and one which we, Suidlanders organisation, use to illustrate our general claim that there is a severe crisis in the Rainbow Nation, even though we are by no means a farmers' advocacy group. On that note, perhaps I should explain who and or what is Suidlanders. Suidlanders' sole mandate, our only raison d'être, is, as a civil defense organization, to execute a national emergency plan to safeguard the welfare of civilians in circumstances of civil war. We are constituted under the aegis of the Geneva Conventions in terms of the specific provisions of Protocol 60 to 69 of Article 60 to 69 of Protocol 1 of the protocols additional to the Geneva Conventions. We are preparing and planning legally and lawfully, decently and respectably for a severe crisis in South Africa. That is how severe we believe that the crisis is. If it sounds surprising to you, perhaps once you have considered the following verifiable facts, truths of what is happening in South Africa, you may appreciate why it is that Suidlanders is the largest organization of its type in the world, and why it is that hundreds of thousands of quiet, law-abiding families, not crazy prepper groups or preppers or rabid right-wingers, are taking our black leaders' threats of civil war seriously. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is black leaders of the new South Africa who are promising war and who are encouraging their members to prepare to prosecute a war against whites. The BBC did not tell you that, did they? CNN, Sky News, Canal 5, the list goes on and on. Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, they won't talk about it. Let's see if perhaps I can share with you some facts. The first theme I shall briefly address in the limited time available is that of the drastic decline and decay of South Africa under the governance of the South African Communist Party, the African National Congress, and the Congress of South African Trade Unions, what is known as the Tripartite Alliance, but which is only ever advertised to you as the African National Congress. South Africa once produced a superabundance of electricity at absurdly low prices. We were the world leader in that regard not a long time ago. Recently, our most prominent electrical scientist, a man whose predictions have hitherto been the most reliable in our country, said that South Africans may expect rolling blackouts for up to 16 hours a day for the next 5 years. They began 4 days ago. On the 10th of February this year, it was reported that the final death toll from moving a group of mental patients from government care to the private care of relatives of the government was 144. Can you imagine this? The government state psychiatric hospitals farm out the patients to, and I speak literally, ladies and gentlemen, to mortuaries, to kindergartens. And that in one group, 144 defenseless psychiatric patients should die. Many of you will be aware that last year, in one village, not town, village, in the province from which I come, over 300 people admitted to actively participating in an ongoing basis in cannibalism. In June 2018, the IMF said that it is worried about South Africa's finances. The bailouts of state-owned enterprises, that's what we call them, such as the national airline, the post office, the national electricity supplier, the railways, etc., stands at 53% of the gross domestic product of our country, not 53% of our budget. 53% of the gross domestic product of our country is devoted solely to bailing out failed institutions. On that note, and perhaps to provide you some sense of perspective on these failing institutions. On the 25th of November, the Auditor General revealed that 296 billion was lost by the government over the past 5 years. The total of lost money for the most recent year, that is to say up to March 2018, was 79 billion. Do you believe this? This is happening in the new South African rainbow nation, ladies and gentlemen. You and I both know that the word lost is merely a euphemism for stolen. Nobody loses money. It's not possible to lose money. It's either in the account or it's not in the account. And that is why 53% of our GDP has to be spent on rescuing state-owned enterprises. It was also reported that there are 12,000 dead people on the National Treasury's database or registry of companies which may conduct business with the state. 12,000. The mini-province that encompasses the city of Johannesburg, it's a sort of a miniature province, not dissimilar to the District of Columbia in the USA. Bigger, but there's a similar idea. The province of Gauteng generates 13% of the GDP of the whole of the continent of Africa. Comes from more or less Johannesburg. 13% of the GDP of the whole of the continent of Africa. But as of now, all 44 of the 44 water sewerage pumping stations on the Vaal River that feeds Johannesburg and the province of Gauteng, are not working. All 44 of the only 44 water and sewerage pumping stations today are not working. And 2 of the 3 sewage treatment plants are not working, and 150 million litres of raw, untreated sewage are flowing into the Vaal River daily. According to the US Census Bureau, the expected lifespan at birth in South Africa has fallen by 4.3 years since the end of apartheid. It was recently revealed by Dr. Mark Tomlinson to immense opprobrium, to the utter disgust of our government, that anybody would be so treacherous as to say this, to make this ostensibly false claim. But it was confirmed in a report by Médecins Sans Frontières on Saturday, that 19% of all of the world's HIV/AIDS cases are in South Africa. On Thursday, the 18th of October, Reuters reported that the number of riots in South Africa is greater than ever. Many of you are of an age where you will have seen the reportage of what was occurring in South Africa in the late 80s, particularly between the Zulu and Xhosa people, who were effectively proxies for the apartheid government and for the African National Congress-led revolutionary forces. So you will know what it means when Reuters says that the number of riots in South Africa is worse than ever. It was recently revealed that over 14,000 government employees have illegally been doing business with their employer, the state. At the South African Airways alone, 13 employees currently now have interest in contracts worth 646 million. As reported in the Mail and Guardian newspaper of 23rd November, the Department of Home Affairs, various branches, are in many cases more closed than open. So if you want to get a passport or an identity document or a driver's license, so on and so forth, don't bother going in most cases. One, which is currently running, by the way, one of these offices is running, in theory it's open, has been closed for 2 years. In another case, one opened one day in the past year. According to a group of organizations led chiefly by one known as People Opposed to Women Abuse, POWER. It is a group of organizations, but the standard bearer for that group is this POWER that I mentioned to you. 35% of all women in South Africa will be raped in their lifetime. Now, they went to pains to point out that that's not an average. In other words, if a woman gets raped 18 times, she doesn't cover, statistically speaking, for 17 other women. No, it's not an average. It doesn't account for multiple rapes. 35 out of 100 women in South Africa will be raped at least once in their lifetime. The second theme that time permits me to employ to justify why an organization, Suidlanders, should exist in the Rainbow Nation is the explicit rhetoric that is being deliberately used in the run-up to what we would tell you is our forthcoming civil war. The African National Congress never fully disbanded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation, whose logo you saw up there not so long ago in Professor's speech, the armed wing of the African National Congress. And last year, the head of Umkhonto we Sizwe in the kingdom of the Zulu people, KwaZulu-Natal province, said, "It is now time for young blacks to join training camps in the bush to learn to fight whites in a civil war that is coming." The former, or rather the Chief Justice, our Chief Justice, Mogoeng, said in an interview in March of this year that South Africa is facing a civil war. On Thursday, the 3rd of November last year, our Minister of Defence said in a televised broadcast, live on television, that if white people protest the rates of attacks on farms, the murders of the farm murders, they will bring a genocide upon themselves. If whites object to this, the Minister of Defence promises a genocide. I should perhaps take advantage of this opportunity to tell you that everything that I've quoted here today is from liberal and mainstream sources. Every single one. The brother of our former president, Thabo Mbeki, his name is Moeletsi Mbeki, he's a very highly regarded commentator. I regard him highly too. I think he's the best political observer in South Africa, has recently said that we are heading towards a civil war. Andile Mqitama of the Black First, Land First organization has in the past few weeks repeatedly spoken about civil war. On, I believe, I could be mistaken, but I believe the 10th or the 9th of October this year, he held an interview with a journalist from Harper's Magazine of America who came to South Africa to write a 6,000-word special for Harper's Magazine. Any of you who know anything about journalism, who know anything about Harper's Magazine, will understand the gravity of what I've just said. To write a 6,000-word piece in a magazine of that stature, arguably the most serious highbrow magazine in all of the United States. He was sponsored, in fact, by the Pulitzer Center. That's how gravely they see this matter. He was told by the same Andile Mqitama that he will settle for nothing less than a Leninist revolution in which the colonialists are wiped out. Julius Malema, the head of the Economic Freedom Fighters Marxist Party, has said on various times that he's not calling for the slaughter of all whites yet. The Prince Regent of South Africa's oldest tribe told me after that, "Simon, in European idiom, you can say something and not mean it." He said, "We don't have such idiom in black language. It just doesn't exist." He said, "What we heard is that he will, at some point, call upon us to wipe out the whites in South Africa. And he said, by implication, we have to prepare for it. The same Julius Malema said quite recently, perhaps 3 months ago, that he is setting out to cut the throat of whiteness. And a few days ago, I think Monday, he said that it is now time for blacks to prepare for war. War is inevitable. The chief advisor to our most recent Minister of Finance, we go through them quite quickly, but the most recent Minister of Finance, his chief advisor, tried to put on the agenda of a closed conference called Blacks in Dialogue the topic, taking up arms against whites. This is the advisor, or the advisor to the former Minister of Finance. And so it is, ladies and gentlemen, that I sit before you here today, pleading with you to recognize that people such as ourselves, just because we are white, and just because we do not correspond to the zeitgeist, to the liberal principles of the new South African Rainbow Nation, don't come here out of spite. We don't come here motivated by racial hatred. We come here because the damn electricity is not working, and because we are being warned that we may expect to be slaughtered. And the mere fact that your media, your politicians, your academics refuse to speak about it should tell you something. Because if a mere fraction of what I've described to you today, all from liberal and mainstream sources, was occurring in Scotland, Vietnam, Peru, Liechtenstein, or Bengal, it would be on the front pages of every newspaper in the world every day for months on end, and you know it. We know that the world is not going to come running to our aid. We don't expect to achieve that here today. But we do believe that there are still left in the world today people who form a hard core of the traditional values of Europe, the values that we share, the values of civilization, decency, and respectability. And all we ask of that hard core is that you spare us a thought in the times that lie ahead of us, because we will need every spare thought that we can get. Dark times lie ahead of my people and my country, ladies and gentlemen. Take my word for it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Those are two very good questions. I didn't mention the farmer tax and the matter of expropriation of land without compensation also, for the simple reason that these subjects we are endeavoring to debate them. You can watch YouTube interviews and so on, and perhaps get this knowledge. But in the limited time available, I thought that it would be good to present lots of other facts, so that it's not just a matter of the white farmers and the poor black guys and the land and those are valid points. We can speak about them all day. I can tell you facts about the murder of white farmers that will turn your hair. For example, there is some dispute over the numbers, but let me tell you that the Commissioner of Police, General Kehla, it means grandfather, Sithole, revealed on Friday the 4th of May that the number of the murder rate of white farmers over the past 3 years is 57 per year. There are approximately 25,000 white farmers in South Africa. Murder, or intentional homicide as it is known, is measured per 100,000. Do the maths. 25,000 goes into 100,000 4 times. 4 times 57, 228 is, according to the government, the murder rate of white farmers over the past 3 years. The murder rate in Europe is about 1 per 100,000. The murder rate in the USA, which is supposed to be gun crazy and all of that, is 4.88. The national murder rate in South Africa now, the government has more or less lost control of crime. The national murder rate of all people in South Africa now is about 35.7. The murder rate of white farmers, if you take the government statistics at face value, you can't compare it. It's unbelievable. But by now, people should know this. I won't, I'm taking up a lot of time, which is unfair, so I won't go on about land expropriation without compensation, but those are two themes that I excluded here so that people can get a broader perspective. Not just about those two themes, but about everything that's happening in the country. Anyway, your second question was where international investors will stand in this. It is very difficult for me to say, but our organization would point to the fact that our government has never ever kept any of its solemn promises on these difficult subjects. They were, for example, the whole debate about the expropriation without compensation, what have you, originates from the fact that the government wrote into our constitution that it would never do this very thing that it is doing now. We would say to you that if it suited the government to expropriate the property of international investors, it would do so. Once it had used up everything else that it could, if that was all that was left, it would do so, with a long list of excuses, of course. They would paint themselves as the victim from beginning to end. I don't know, but our most prominent economist is a man by the name of Davie Rood, who has hitherto, over the past 24 years of democracy, the African National Congress assumed power on the 27th of April 1994. Over the intervening 24 and a half years, Davie Rood has always been a flag bearer for the new South African rainbow nation. We should try harder, we should love each other more, harmony, integration, blah, 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 blah. He recently released a series of videos in which he said explicitly, take your money out of the country, get your money out of the country while you still can. He's a very serious man. And he's done a 180-degree turn. So I think that that is the advice which I, as a non-economist, as an ignoramus, as an ordinary citizen, would take from an expert if I was a foreigner contemplating an investment in South Africa. I don't know any better.
Ja mam pytanie do pana Simona, bo to coś...
That's a very, very good question. I was recently chatting to a farmer, and he said, we were speaking about a certain area that we both know, with which we're both familiar. His cousin farms in a beautiful little valley, and there are 6 farms there. 5 are owned by blacks, and 1 is owned by this farmer's cousin, a white man. And he was telling my friend how happy he is that these farms have been given to blacks because they're not being farmed. And so the water rights for the little stream that flows through the valley are all going to him. He's stealing everybody else's water because the 5 black farms are not being farmed at all. Which brings me to a point. The reality is that many of the farms and the land that has been transferred in recent years is lying fallow and is not being used, which goes to your question of the ownership. I have here, there was a parliamentary debate recently in which it was revealed that over 90% of the farms that have gone to black people, the title deeds have not been given to the black people. Similarly, there are about 45,000 commercial farming units in South Africa. I'm coming to a point. There are about 45,000 commercial farming units in South Africa, of which about 33 or 32,000 are owned by whites. And this land is supposed to resolve the great land crisis in South Africa. How do you give 45,000 farms on land that is dry, 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 to 1,000 people each? How? You ask a good question. And my response to you is to say that it is clear that there are a number of factors in this debate that don't make any sense at all, as your question points out. Your question illustrates a much larger topic. A whole lot of this stuff doesn't make sense, but it sounds good. And it is, we would say, very much a communist ploy, and that you are correct. But people in our country just don't see it. It is consistent with, to use the American expression, the communist playbook, the communist manual. This is how you go about it. Doesn't have to make sense, as long as people believe it. Again, a very, very good question. The murder rate of farmers has decreased slightly. It's still phenomenally high, as I've pointed out to you. But in that decrease, some people have said, well, you see, it's better. You know, let's say there is a trend towards 160 or 145 per 100,000 murder of farmers. People say, it's wonderful, you see, you're living in paradise. What they lose sight of is what I pointed out to you earlier. 4.88 murder rate in the USA, whatever. My point is that when it comes down, it's because somebody did something. The rate of attack, this is what nobody mentions, has gone up. It is because the farmers are protecting themselves that you know, they're trying to. If you go to a farm in South Africa now, you can experience maybe a tall fence, 15 feet tall fence, with a razor wire, with electric fencing as well. The farmers all have weapons, vicious dogs. We have in recent decades mastered a breed called the Boerboel dog, which is about the size of a mastiff, but has the temperament of a pit bull terrier. Some farmers, I'm telling you a true fact, and there are some videos, I have one on my phone. Some farmers are now using wild lions in their gardens to deter attacks. that gives a sense of perspective. I think now I'll answer your question very directly. You can get weapons in South Africa. We used to have a very big gun culture. But the African National Congress, the tripartite alliance with the South African Communist Party, is now trying to clamp down to make it more and more difficult. In fact, they are now proposing that that weapons for self-defense, firearms for self-defense, be banned. But none of the murders are being committed by people with legal firearms. The African National Congress brought in, under Operation Vula, in the late 80s and early 90s, millions and millions and millions and millions of weapons from the communist bloc. More than 2 million of those weapons are unrecovered, and it's well known that those are the weapons being used in the murders. But this is a classic tactic, isn't it? Blame the victim. If I take your gun away, we'll all be safer. But I'm going to keep my 7 guns, which are illegal. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not even sure that the answer makes sense in my own ears. It's all nonsense.
Please. We have to add also that in South Africa, farmers live not in the villages like in Europe, but they are spread all over the country, very thinly, because, as I mentioned, the quality of the land is very poor, so they have to own a large area just to keep the living. So this is the problem, that even if something happened on one farm, it's very difficult to bring the support from the other farm. This is a specificity of South Africa. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much again for coming. Thank you very much, our distinguished guests, Simon, the Professor, Peter, for being with us today, for giving us this significant information, important information, which must be followed by, I hope, ECR group in this House, in order to better recognize this situation and widespread this knowledge within our colleagues in the European Parliament, but also in the context of our relations with and contacts with European Commission. We should be much more active also in the future. This is my first, the most important conclusion after this meeting, that there are things which should be absolutely better recognized, and the knowledge should be delivered directly to the people who decide about foreign policy of the European Union, and we will do the best in order to do it during the upcoming months. Thank you very much for all participants. Thank you very much for everybody who helped us to organize this meeting. I hope that all information you get today will be helpful in terms of better understanding South Africa political situation and also Africa as a whole. I'm definitely sure that the big challenge, the big interest of the European Union is to help South Africa in order to avoid civil war, which would be terrible, which would have terrible consequences for the rest of the world, for Europe especially, in terms of immigration crisis. So thank you very much again. Wish you a good rest of the day and see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.